Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Gravemist Whisper. Now I know many of you listen to these stories in the dark, so before we begin, take a second to comment where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see our little night community spread across the world. Tonight's story is something different. It isn't a collection of encounters. It's a single haunting, unfolding piece by piece. A woman finds a sealed diary in her new home, and what starts as curiosity turns into a terrifying revelation that blurs the line between memory and possession. So, dim the lights, settle in, and listen closely. Because tonight, we're opening the locked diary. Claire Patterson didn't believe in omens. She believed in clean breaks, new jobs, new cities, new beginnings. When she signed the lease for the old townhouse on Brookside Lane, it felt like a reset button on everything that had gone wrong the year before. The place was affordable, quiet, and close enough to her office that she could walk. The landlord had smiled when she handed over the keys, saying, "It's been empty for a while. You'll like the quiet." For the first few days, it was exactly that. Quiet. Too quiet. There was something about the way sound behaved in that house. Her footsteps felt muffled, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. When she spoke on the phone, her voice echoed faintly back, delayed by half a second, like someone repeating her words behind the plaster. Still, she told herself it was just settling noises, an old home stretching after years of vacancy, until she found the spare room. The door was painted shut, the knob stiff with old enamel. The landlord had told her it was just storage, nothing to worry about, full of old junk that isn't worth clearing out. But that night, with nothing on TV and the air feeling thick and electric, she decided to peek inside. The door opened after a shove, dust curling from the hinges like a sigh. Inside was a single small window, its curtains yellowed from age, and the air cold, stale. The kind of stillness that felt almost alive. The room had no furniture, except for a tall, narrow dresser standing crooked against the wall. The top 3 drawers opened easily, old linens, brittle papers, a few rusted buttons. But the bottom drawer wouldn't budge. At first she assumed it was just swollen wood, but when she looked closer, she realized it had been painted shut, not recently but long ago. Layers of thick, uneven paint sealing its edges, like someone had tried to bury whatever was inside. A shiver ran through her. She told herself it was silly, just old furniture. Yet later that night, long after she'd gone to bed, her eyes kept drifting to the open doorway across the hall. The spare room felt awake. Around midnight, she got up. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. She went to the kitchen, grabbed a butter knife, and returned to the room barefoot. The moment she slipped the knife into the seam of the drawer, the air seemed to change, denser, cooler. Paint flaked like dried skin as she scraped. Then, with a dry crack, the seal gave way. The drawer slid open on its own. Inside, wrapped in an old piece of linen that had once been white, was a small brass key tied neatly with red string, and beneath it, a leather-bound diary. The diary was dark brown, cracked, and soft at the edges, the kind of leather that had absorbed decades of hands and secrets. A tiny brass clasp held it shut, the keyhole matching the one on the red string. She lifted it carefully. It was cold to the touch. The smell hit her next, faint smoke, something like old perfume, and underneath it all, dampness. The scent of something that had been buried too long. Claire didn't open it. Not yet. She left it on the dresser and stepped back, heart beating fast for reasons she couldn't explain. The air in the room felt lighter now, like something had finally exhaled after years of waiting. When she returned to her bedroom, she could still hear the faint sound of the drawer settling back into place. A slow, wooden sigh. As she drifted toward uneasy sleep, a breeze passed through the hallway, brushing the edges of her door. It shouldn't have been possible. The windows were closed. And downstairs, on the dresser in the cold room, the diary's brass clasp shifted slightly, just enough for the key tied in red string to swing once and stop. By the next evening, the key had begun to haunt Claire's thoughts. It sat on her nightstand, the red string coiled neatly beside the diary. Every time she walked past, the brass glinted in the lamplight, quiet, patient, as if waiting for her to finish what she'd started. She lasted until sunset before giving in. The air felt unusually heavy that night, thick with the kind of stillness that makes old houses feel alive. She sat at the small kitchen table with a mug of tea gone cold, the diary before her. Her thumb brushed the clasp. The metal was warm. When she turned the key, the click echoed louder than it should have, like something exhaling through the walls. The pages smelled of smoke and lavender, each one softly wrinkled as if from a trembling hand. The ink had bled slightly with age, but the handwriting was steady, looping, deliberate, written by someone who had known what it meant to write for herself. The first page read, March 12, 1949. I write so I will not forget myself. The house listens. It hums when I breathe. Claire frowned, tracing the indentation of the letters. There was something intimate about the way it was written, the kind of entry made by someone who didn't expect anyone to read it. She turned the page. March 18th. The wind does not move the curtains anymore. I thought I heard him come home, but the footsteps stopped at the door and waited until morning. The entries continued, each one smaller, more frantic than the last. The woman wrote of loneliness, of rooms that whispered back when she prayed, of doors that refused to stay open, of mirrors that seemed to breathe when she looked away. April the 2nd. It walks the hallway again. I think it wants me to answer. Claire sat back, a nervous laugh escaping her. Old stories, she muttered. Old ghosts. But even as she said it, she felt a strange pressure in her chest. Something about the last line lingered in her ears. It walks the hallway again. The house was quiet. Too quiet. She closed the diary, the sound sharp in the silence, and pushed it away. Maybe it was just her imagination, the power of suggestion, the way words can make an ordinary place feel strange. She turned out the kitchen light, the floor creaking beneath her feet as she walked to her room. But as she reached the top of the stairs, she heard it, faint, deliberate, a single creak in the hallway behind her. She froze. No wind, no draft. Just that one sound, like weight shifting on an old board. Her heart pounded. She told herself it was the house settling, but when she listened closer, she could hear something softer, a slow, rhythmic noise, almost like breathing. Claire backed into her room, shut the door, and stood still. Nothing, only silence. She climbed into bed, staring at the faint shape of the diary through the open doorway across the hall. The moonlight caught its brass clasp, making it gleam faintly. When she finally closed her eyes, the sound came again, faint scratching. At first she thought it was rain on the glass, but it wasn't rhythmic like rain. It was deliberate, soft strokes, pausing, then continuing, like the sound of a pen moving across paper. Her breath caught. It was coming from inside the walls. She told herself she was imagining it, but deep down she knew that rhythm, the same one she had seen written in looping black ink just hours before. Careful, deliberate, patient. And as the noise stopped, she thought she heard something else. A whisper, barely audible, muffled through the plaster. A woman's voice, low, sad, repeating a single word. Right? For days, Claire told herself she was being ridiculous. It was just an old book, someone's diary, nothing more. She should have put it away, left it in the drawer where it belonged, but every night after work, she found herself drawn to it like a magnet. She read by lamplight, fingertips smudged with dust and ink. The diary's words had become a kind of gravity in her evenings, dark, heavy, and strangely soothing. The author wrote of grief, then madness, of hearing humming in the pipes and soft knocks in the walls that came only when she wept. There were mentions of a husband who went to war and never came back, and of a house that learned to listen after he was gone. Each night, Claire promised herself one more page, and each night she lost hours to the story. But then, something changed. It happened on a Tuesday morning, bright sunlight cutting through the window, her coffee steaming beside her. Claire had left the diary on the kitchen table. When she flipped to her bookmark later that evening, she noticed something strange. The next page wasn't aged or yellow like the others. It looked newer, crisper. And the date written at the top wasn't from 1949. It was today, Tuesday. She moves through the rooms as if they were hers. I see her reflection when she stands by the window. Claire frowned. The handwriting was exactly the same. Looping, elegant, even the same faded ink tone. But the ink itself was still wet. The words glistened faintly under the light, as if someone had just finished writing them. Her heart thudded. She reread the line, every word pressing tighter against her chest. She moves through the rooms, as if they were hers. I see her reflection when she stands by the window. That was exactly what Claire had done that morning, standing at the window, cup of coffee in hand, watching the street below before leaving for work. A prickle ran down her spine. She looked around the kitchen. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that felt aware, as if something unseen had paused, waiting for her reaction. She slammed the diary shut. Instantly, the air shifted. The hum in the refrigerator faltered for half a second. The lights flickered once. A faint vibration ran through the table, like the thump of a heartbeat deep under the floorboards. The air grew heavy, electric, and then, from somewhere deep inside the house, a door creaked open. Claire froze. The sound was slow, deliberate, hinges groaning in protest. It came from upstairs. She forced herself to move step by step, her feet quiet against the wooden floor. "Hello," she whispered, the words sounding too small in the vast silence. No reply. Only that soft, echoing creak, followed by stillness. She reached the base of the staircase. The air there was colder, almost damp, carrying the faint scent of old wood and candle smoke. Something about it made her stomach tighten. She slowly climbed, hand brushing the banister, the same one she'd cleaned days before. Her fingers came away black with dust, but she had wiped it clean. When she reached the landing, she noticed the source of the noise. The door to the spare room, the one where she'd found the diary, now stood wide open. She had shut it that morning. She was sure of it. Inside, the air pulsed faintly, like a held breath. The curtains stirred, though the window was closed. And on the dresser, the diary lay open again. She approached slowly, heart hammering, eyes fixed on the glistening ink. New words had appeared beneath the last entry, written in the same elegant hand. She reads my thoughts. She thinks they are her own. Claire stumbled back, knocking into the dresser. The lamp flickered violently, then went out. In the dark, she could just make out the faint reflection of herself in the mirror above the dresser. Only her reflection was smiling. And she wasn't. She ran from the room, slamming the door behind her, pressing her back against the wall. Her heart thundered in her chest as she listened, waiting, praying. But the only sound that came from inside was the slow turning of pages. That night, Claire dreamed of the woman. Not just any woman. The woman. The one who had written the diary. In the dream, she sat at Claire's kitchen table beneath a dim yellow light, her hair pinned neatly, her blouse high-collared and grey with age. The candle beside her flickered weakly, its flame bending toward the open book before her. Each time the pen touched paper, the flame seemed to shiver, as if afraid of what she was writing. The sound of scratching, the tip of a fountain pen dragging slowly across paper, filled the air. Claire tried to speak, but no words came out. Her mouth moved, but all she could hear was breathing. The woman finally looked up. Her face was soft, but wrong. Eyes sunken, smile faint and knowing. "It listens," she whispered. "It always has." The candlelight went out. Claire woke, gasping, drenched in cold sweat. For a moment she thought it was still night, but her bedside lamp flickered to life when she touched it. Her heart slowed. Then she saw it. The diary, open, on her nightstand. She hadn't brought it upstairs. She had left it on the kitchen counter before bed. The pages fluttered slightly, as though stirred by a breath. She reached out with a trembling hand, feeling the chill radiating from the paper. There, in that same elegant handwriting, were new words. "Do not try to leave. The house is not done remembering you." The ink shimmered faintly, still wet. Claire's breath caught. Her first thought was that someone had broken in, that there was a logical explanation. She checked the locks, the windows, every room. Nothing. No footprints in the dust near the back door. No open windows. But when she stepped into the hallway, the air had changed. It was colder, sharper, like the moment before a thunderstorm. The walls seemed to groan, a slow, aching sound that rose up from the foundation itself. Then came the breathing. Faint, slow, through the vents. At first she thought it was her own, echoing somehow, but it didn't match her rhythm. When she inhaled, it exhaled. When she held her breath, it kept going, long and patient. Claire backed toward her bedroom, trying not to make a sound. Every board beneath her feet betrayed her, creaking in protest. She shut the door, leaned against it and listened. The breathing continued, closer now, circling the hallway outside. She could hear it moving from vent to vent, floor to ceiling, like something was inside the walls. Then came a faint tapping. 1, 2, 3. She turned toward the nightstand. The diary was shaking slightly, its pages fluttering like a heartbeat. "Stop," she whispered, as if it could hear her. The tapping grew louder, then faster. She snatched the diary and threw it into the drawer, slamming it shut. The noise stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse. Claire sank to the floor, her back against the bed, trying to steady her breathing. The house seemed to settle again, the kind of settling that sounds almost like sighing. And then, faintly, she heard it. A pen, scratching. Not from the drawer, from beneath the floor. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she leaned closer to the wood. There it was again. Faint, steady strokes, as if someone was writing just inches below her. She crawled backward, shaking, staring at the floorboards. "Stop it," she whispered again, voice breaking. "Please stop." The sound obeyed. Then, a final creak from the hallway. The door to the spare room, the one she'd sealed again, swung open with a long, low moan. The air turned frigid. Her breath came out in pale clouds. And from somewhere deep in the house, a voice, thin as paper and heavy as grief, whispered through the vents. "You opened the drawer. Now I remember you. Morning light always made the townhouse look almost normal again. Dust caught in the beams, the floors creaked softly in the warmth, and Claire could almost convince herself that the things she'd heard, the writing, the whispering, were just stress and sleeplessness. So that morning, she made a promise to herself. Ignore it. She shoved the diary into the drawer of the nightstand, slammed it shut, and left for work. No checking the spare room, no glancing at the vents, no listening for breath that shouldn't be there. Just work, coffee, and sunlight. The hours passed easily enough, but something gnawed at the back of her mind. The same restless energy that had followed her since the first night she opened that drawer. By the time she reached her car at dusk, her phone buzzed once, then died. She didn't remember letting it drain. She didn't remember forgetting to charge it. The streets were quiet when she pulled up to Brookside Lane. The windows of the house stared back at her like dark eyes. Inside, everything was still. Too still. She tossed her keys on the counter, hung her coat, and froze halfway to the living room. Something was off. The air was warmer than usual, heavy like breath on glass. When she stepped into the hallway, she noticed it. The bathroom door, slightly ajar, light spilling from beneath it, even though she hadn't turned it on that morning. She reached out, pushed the door open. The mirror above the sink was fogged completely over. Not streaked, not smudged. Fogged. But the room was bone dry. No shower, no steam. She stared at the glass, her reflection a faint blur beneath the cloudy surface. Then she saw it. A single handprint. Small, delicate, feminine. Pressed right in the center of the mirror, as if someone had stood there and touched the glass from the inside. Claire stepped back, heart slamming in her chest. She wiped it away quickly, too, her towel squeaking against the glass. But when the fog cleared, she froze. In the reflection, another woman stood behind her. Same height, same posture, same tilt of the head, only older. Her hair was pinned back in a 1940s style. Her blouse was grey and buttoned high to the throat. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes, they weren't angry. They were tired. For a heartbeat, Claire couldn't breathe. She turned, and the room was empty. No one behind her, only the faint echo of her own breath. The towel slipped from her hand. When she looked back at the mirror, the reflection was normal again. Just her, pale and shaking. But something had changed. There, on the bathroom counter, sat the diary. She hadn't brought it in here. The drawer upstairs was still half closed when she left this morning. Now, the diary lay open on the counter, its brass clasp unlocked, a page turned as if by wind. Her pulse roared in her ears as she leaned over it. The handwriting was the same looping script, darker now, pressed hard into the paper. A single line. "You saw me. Good." The ink shimmered faintly. Fresh. Claire stumbled backward, hitting the sink, her hand gripping the edge for balance. The faucet turned on by itself, sputtering, water spilling out in slow pulses. When she looked up, the fog began to creep back over the mirror. This time, it wasn't blank. Letters began to form. 5 words, slow and deliberate, drawn by a hand she couldn't see. "Read, or I'll write you." The air grew cold. Her breath fogged the glass beside the letters. She ran, slamming the door behind her, the sound echoing through the narrow hallway. From the other side came a soft tap, then another, then the slow, deliberate drag of fingers across glass. By dawn, Claire had made up her mind. No more reading, no more listening, no more pretending this was normal. The diary had turned her house into something else, a thing that remembered her, that spoke back. She couldn't sleep anymore, couldn't eat without feeling the hum in the walls. Every reflection, every creak of wood carried the same presence. Watching, waiting. So that morning, she decided to end it. She carried the diary to the backyard, wrapped in an old towel as if afraid to touch it directly. The grass was slick with dew, and the air had that still, sharp edge that comes before rain. She dropped the book on the cold ground, struck a match, and held it above the cover. The tiny flame trembled, wavering against the morning wind. But when it touched the leather, something strange happened. The flame didn't spread. It stuck, as if pinned to the surface. The smoke that rose wasn't grey, but faintly blue. The pages began to curl, blackening at the edges, yet they didn't crumble. No ash, no smoke trail, just the faint sound of something whispering, too low to understand. She dropped the match. The fire sputtered out instantly, leaving only the faint scent of iron, and something burnt, not like paper, but like skin. Panic prickled her spine. She kicked the diary into the metal trash bin, the lid clanging shut. "Stay there," she whispered, breath trembling. As she turned to go back inside, the bin rattled once, violently, then went still. She froze. The morning was silent again. Even the birds had stopped. Slowly she backed away, heart pounding, refusing to look behind her. She locked the door and pressed her back against it, listening. Nothing. Only her pulse in her ears. But that night, when she returned to her room, the diary was back, sitting neatly on her bedside table, exactly where it had been before she tried to destroy it. The towel she'd wrapped it in was still damp, the faint smell of ash hanging in the air. Her hands shook as she reached for it. The cover felt warmer than usual, almost pulsing beneath her fingers. She opened it. New words bled through the page, spreading like veins under parchment. "Names are for those who leave. I am the keeper. You can be too." The ink was still moving, letters blooming like bruises, curling and thickening even as she watched. Claire whispered to herself, "No, no, no," and slammed the book shut. The lamp beside her flickered once, then again. The shadows in the room seemed to lean toward her. The hum returned, that deep, low vibration she had first mistaken for the refrigerator, now rising through the floorboards like something alive. She turned toward the nightstand. The drawer, the one that had once held the diary, was shaking slightly. Its brass key, still tied with red string, stood upright in the lock, though she hadn't touched it in days. It turned, slowly, on its own. The drawer slid open with a long sigh, the same sound that had haunted her that first night. Inside, empty. Only the faint outline of the diary's shape remained, burned into the wood. But the hum didn't stop. It grew louder. Claire backed away, watching as the walls seemed to pulse, breathing again, the way the woman's words had described. The air shimmered faintly, and a voice rose through the floor, gentle but hollow, like breath over glass. "Every house needs a keeper." Her lights flickered once more, then went out. In the darkness, the faint glow of red string drifted near the floor, the key slowly spinning in the open drawer, metal whispering against metal. And in the quiet that followed, the diary's pages turned by themselves. One last time before the hum faded completely. Hum. By the seventh night, Claire Patterson had stopped pretending she could win. There was no ignoring it anymore. The whispers, the breathing, the way her own reflection sometimes lagged behind her movements. Sleep had become impossible. The air in the house felt thicker every hour, humming faintly like a distant generator. Shadows stretched too far across the floor. The brass key never stopped spinning, slow and patient, in the drawer beside her bed. She'd tried everything. Salt at the doors, open windows, prayers whispered to empty rooms. But no matter what she did, the house answered back. So that night, she stopped fighting. The lamp flickered once, twice, and she sat down at the kitchen table, the same place she'd first opened the diary, the same place where the woman in her dream had once written by candlelight. The diary lay waiting, still warm, still breathing. Claire's hands trembled as she opened it. The scent of smoke and ink met her like an old memory. The pages shifted faintly, as if the book itself were sighing. She took the pen she'd left beside it. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she wrote. "Thank you." The words looked fragile on the page, small and hopeful, a final note to something she couldn't understand. But before she could pull the pen away, the ink beneath her handwriting began to move. At first, it spread like spilled wine, thick, dark, and slow. Then it began to crawl, the letters bending and merging, forming new words beneath hers. "You think the house is me. I am not the house. I am what it remembers." Claire's pulse quickened. Her chair creaked as she leaned back, watching the words stretch across the page like veins. Then came another line. "When it knocks, do not knock back." Her breath caught. The air temperature dropped instantly, frost blooming along the edge of the window. The lights flickered, buzzed, then dimmed to a dull orange. Lo, and then 3 slow knocks, deep, heavy, from beneath her feet. Each one sent a vibration through the floorboards, the sound of wood groaning under invisible weight. Knock, 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 kibutz it, knock. Claire stood so fast the chair fell behind her. The pen clattered to the ground, rolling to a stop near the trash bin, the one she had thrown the diary into days before. Her heart hammered in her chest. She didn't grab her phone, didn't take her keys. She just ran. Through the hallway, down the stairs, past the spare room door that hung slightly open. She didn't look inside. She couldn't. Outside, the cold air hit her lungs like water. She ran until the streetlights blurred, until her breath came out in ragged clouds. Neighbors later said they saw her, barefoot, hair wild, running down Brookside Lane at 2 a.m. But when police arrived minutes later, she was gone. When they entered the house, everything was still. No lights, no movement. Only the faint smell of smoke and ink. The diary lay open on the kitchen table, its pages soaked completely black, ink glistening under flashlight beams. Every page was filled, dense layers of handwriting overlapping itself, illegible, feverish. But under the black, the detectives noticed faint indentations in the paper, carved so deep they cut through the final page. When they tilted the light just right, the words became visible. "She left, but she will write again." The case report noted that the diary was logged as evidence, but the file ended abruptly. Months later, the officer who had first handled the book resigned without explanation, claiming he kept hearing it turn pages in his sleep. As for Claire Patterson, she was never found. But sometimes, neighbors say, when the wind moves down Brookside Lane, they can hear faint tapping, slow, steady, like a pen on paper, coming from the boarded-up townhouse. And, every so often, through the cracks of the upstairs window, a flicker of light, like someone writing by candle. And that brings us to the end of the locked diary. What do you think really happened to Claire? Was the house alive? Or was it something that learned to remember through her? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every one of them. If you enjoyed tonight's story, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves dark, slow-burn horror. And remember, some things aren't written by hand, they write you. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.